Welcome to YogaGeorge. I'm excited to have you with me. In case you didn't know, I'm YogaGeorge. And today is a special day for me. It's the maiden interview of the YogaGeorge journey. For those of you who are regular followers of YogaGeorge, you will know that I arrived to the Los Angeles area via cruise ship. That's why I thought I'd stick with the nautical theme for just a moment. You'll see we'll have some visitors as we go by here. As I've described in other videos, YogaGeorge is my attempt to help you, my viewers, understand and demystify yoga. As I journey from a practitioner to an instructor, I will be posting various videos, sharing what I'm learning along the way. Those of you who know me are also aware that I like to travel, and that I am sharing pictures and videos as I visit new locations. Along the way, I intend to seek out local yogis and see what we can learn from their personal journeys. Today we have Sera Underwood with us for our first interview. Sera holds a special place in my heart as my first instructor. Her patience and teaching style is what kept me going as a beginner and helped inspire me to become an instructor. In order to do a live interview, I booked her California cruise so I could be here in person. She's that good. So enough with the introductions. Let's meet the star of the hour. Good afternoon, everyone. As promised, here's the star of our show, our interview, and you are
Sera Underwood.
And where are you from, Sera?
I was born and raised in Southern California.
Okay, so we have a number of questions for Sera today, so that you can get to learn more about her and her journey for yoga. So I'd like to start with, how long have you been a yogi, Sera?
Well, so that's a fun question because I feel like I originally started practicing yoga in the late 90s sometime, but I don't feel like I was very serious about it.
Okay.
So it was just something that I did. I followed some videos and, would come in and out of the practice, but didn't really find what I feel like being a yogi is like until about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And at that point I started my real yoga journey, I feel like.
Okay, well what changed at that point that had you go from a casual practitioner to maybe somebody that actually felt they were more embracing what yoga is all about?
A really good instructor. I took a class and struck a chord or two with me, and some things happened that I couldn't really explain, and it just turned on this spark for me where I could not get enough. And I've just been on the journey ever since, countless certifications and constant learning, and I still kind of come in and out of the practice right now just because that's where my life is at, but yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So we're going to move on here to another question. I need to apologize to our viewing audience here. Our questions are up on a teleprompter and I need to advance them and pause them. So we're all learning here. This is number one. So all right. So one of the aspects of yoga that I think is a little confusing to people who aren't immersed in it is, what is yoga? So I know there's all kinds of textbook answers to this, but from your perspective, Sera, what does yoga mean to you?
Yoga to me is a handful of things. It's a journey of self-improvement, I think, first and foremost. Like I said, I started it just wanting to be flexible and have a little bit of fitness in my life, and so I think for some people that's maybe where it starts for them, or maybe that's all that it is to them. And then I think more than anything else, it's this this path that you take of more and more self-awareness, and being able to notice patterns in yourself, habits that are both good and maybe need some improvement. So to me, yoga is much more in your mind than in the physical body.
It's interesting because I know that when I started, I went into it just from a flexibility standpoint. I've used the phrase, I want to have a better body at retirement than I did then 4 years ago. But the union of mind and body has kind of crept in, which is a big part of yoga, and with the goal of living in the moment, not in the past or in the future. And whether I intended it or not, I kind of got into that, and I found that very fascinating, very fulfilling from a more than an exercise perspective.
Yeah, love that.
So from an inspiration standpoint then, Sarah, what has inspired you?
So that continues to change. You know, what inspires me to get back on the mat is how I feel physically, to link back up with my breath and my body and my mind and soul. I think that that's an inspiration. What inspires me to be a teacher, which I'm currently not teaching right now, which is sad. But
You're teaching me right now.
Okay,
so.
That's fine too.
You're teaching our audience.
That's fine too. Yeah, 2020 took my life and kind of swirled it around a little bit, so I'm on a, I don't know, different trajectory, but it'll come back, and I know that. But what inspired me as a teacher was my students. Really, I love questions, and I love my students' goals. And so what was inspiring to me was helping people to reach wherever it was that they were trying to go. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's just touching their toes, or maybe it's having less stress, or, you know, really actually connecting and being there on the mat and learning a little bit more. And sometimes they don't even have a goal. Mm-hmm. And my inspiration is sparking some of that interest. Like, I don't tend to teach the most fitnessy based yoga. I teach a very mindful flow. You know, I love to get into a pose and to feel every aspect of it, and to work into it, and to like get into the ebb and the flow that's in the body, that's in the breath, that's really like getting you more connected with what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what inspires me.
Yeah, I like that particular variant of the yoga, because I've taken some classes that have been more you know, fitness based, where they're clicking through the poses in rapid succession, and so you're moving. It's almost like a you know, an aerobic exercise, but as one who wants to try and get my body in better shape, getting into a pose, you know, tweaking it, the cues, all of those things, I find much more rewarding. Mm-hmm. It's harder in some ways, different type of hard, but I enjoy it. So that was one of the things I liked about your class, and I think it resonated and clicked with me.
Nice.
So from a style standpoint, there's a lot of different variants of yoga, and I don't think everybody is aware of that out there. So, you know, what's your style? You know, what school of yoga do you teach? And can you tell us a little bit about why?
Yeah. So I did my first certification as a Hatha, just straight up Hatha certification. My mentors were also influenced with Vini Yoga. Vini Yoga tends to go like in and out before you really get deep into a pose. I feel like I've hung on to a lot of that style as well. My last certification that I did was, we don't use the word anymore that much because it's been tainted, but Anusara is something that most people will know. My teacher...
I don't know what that is.
Okay, well, that's fine. It's alignment based. And my mentor in Michigan, she has renamed her style as Yoga from the Heart. And it definitely, like, taking one of her classes, I think that you can feel that. The very first time I stepped into her studio, I felt like that's where I needed to be. And she made me see yoga in a whole new light. Like I had been doing yoga for over 10 years, and then all of a sudden I took a class from her and down dog felt different. So it's not just the from the heart part where she puts in a lot more, even more, so I like to call it fluff sometimes, because it's fluff. It's like I sometimes am the bare bones. Like I'm gonna get you in there and we're gonna tuck some anatomy, and hers is a lot more airy, and she wants you to feel like the sun shine out of your inside, which is so inspiring and amazing. That's why I think the from the heart for her is a great name for it. I feel like as we take these influences from other teachers, we kind of have to make it our own, and then you know, whatever. I don't have a name for mine, but yeah, so Sera is an alignment that focuses on very specific cues that continue on throughout almost every single posture. And it's one that spoke to me right away because, like I said, like I felt down dog all of a sudden like a brand new pose. She taught me Trikonasana in a triangle pose, and I never knew it was a hamstring stretch before because I'm flexible. So I just got into the pose and never really but grounding your feet in, softening your shins forward, pulling your thighs back on almost every pose. First of all, puts your spine into alignment. Amazing. I'm also a Pilates teacher, so I'm big on spinal alignment. And then getting me to get into these poses a little bit differently was a game changer to me. Really renewed the spark that I had. I had been looking for a mentor and for, just a new path to rekindle it. I had a studio in Belize for 5 years, and I felt like I had kind of leveled out. I even went to India. I did a training in India, a Hatha certification there, and I didn't have that same spark. I thought I'm gonna go to the place where yoga was born, and I'm gonna have this amazing epiphany and
spiritual awakening.
Yes, I was all about it, about it. And I went, and it was, I don't regret it. It was amazing, and also a crazy roller coaster. If you've ever gone to India, it's the highest highs, the lowest lows. It's that. So I'm glad I did it, but I didn't walk away from it really that much deeper into my seat as a teacher. And then I went to Michigan and I met this lady, and I was like, wow, okay,
it's amazing.
This is where I need to be.
And it's amazing where you find those connections.
Yeah.
And I had the benefit because you picked up all these nuances on the cues and whatnot, and you taught the folks at Gentex about that.
Yeah.
Just so you guys know, Sera was my instructor at a local West Michigan company called Gentex. She was doing corporate training, and ironically, she had 3 to 6 guys for the most part that were the regulars, and we all needed help, and we're very grateful that Sera was there for us.
It was a great group. I miss it.
Well, we appreciated you being there. All right, I love the description you gave, Sera, about your journey going through this and how you've met a different instructor, a different mentor, the term you use, and how that affected your practice of the yoga, what you got out of it from both a physical and a spiritual standpoint. So from a next phase then, do you have any new personal goals? What do you want to achieve moving forward? You said you're kind of in a transition period due to 2020 and a new move, or are you just kind of waiting to see where that next inspiration hits you?
Well, as a personal goal, I would like to get back into a more immersed version of my life with yoga as more of the forefront. So I think short term, that's got to be on my radar. I work 50 hours a week in a whole completely different field. I do work in a wellness field, so I feel like that is adding benefit, and maybe it will get me to reach my bigger goal, which since my very first teacher that I ever had, she's a yoga therapist, and I find that so very inspiring. She's got success stories from getting people off of their diabetes medicine and high blood pressure medicine, all through the practice of not just physical asana, but really getting them to acknowledge what their patterns are: eating, sleeping, your mental process. Do you beat yourself up in your mind? All of those things are going to continue to make you sick, to make you stressed. So she really works with people, and then she adds in some postures and stuff as well. But I think more than anything else, it's a more holistic look at life. And one cool thing about being back in California right now is that she's still in California, and she has a yoga therapy training. It's 3 years long, so I gotta be ready and maybe not working 50 hours a week.
You have to make time for that, I'm sure.
But that's kind of hoping. That's what I'm hoping is my future. Right now, everything is. It is where it is.
Yeah, I like the yoga therapy terminology and that side of it. And as you talked about, there's some physical aspects of that. The patterns we get into and how we behave and how that affects our body, but also the mental patterns. What conversations do we have in our head? I think of those as demons. What demons do we have? Are we reliving conversations with people? Are we arguing with people that aren't in the room in our heads?
Yeah. And
just what a waste of time that is, and waste of life. And so for me, when I've heard that yoga can help you get focused in on the moment right now that we're living in, and escape worrying about the future or dwelling on the past. To me, that's just something that's so potentially life-changing for people. If I can help people start on a journey for that, I think I'm doing something helpful. So
100%. Yeah. Before I started to get deep into yoga, I didn't realize how all of my negative conversations that I was having, and I grew up in a very kind of sarcastic household, and things were always pretty negative. I don't know, there wasn't a ton of positivity. Nobody was there to boost you up. You definitely did not have a cheerleader. And that's just, I didn't realize that all of that was going on. And it wasn't until I took my first training and I said, oh, that's what's going on in there. And so little by little it started to change, I was like, oh, I have road rage. Didn't even really acknowledge that before I took a yoga class, my first yoga certification. I said, oh, okay. So then it was listening to that and then changing it, and then it was my game. I would, how long can I hold on to the more yogic side of me? This person cut me off, and maybe he has someplace, to be. Maybe he's really sick, or an emergency or whatever it is.
Maybe they're just unaware that they did.
Right. Totally. Yeah. Right. All of those things. But all of the chatter, and then it just got deeper and deeper, and then it was oh, it's not just the road rage that I have. I tell myself terrible things when I look in the mirror, and I, you really start to evaluate all of those conversations. And then as soon as I start changing my inner narrative, my outer world changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you think about it, we would never have a conversation with a friend or a family member where we say all these negative things to them.
Right.
But the recognition is that we do this to ourselves.
100%.
And again, if you can get away from that, your life is going to be a whole lot better.
Right.
And I don't think a lot of people might recognize that that's the tools to help you change that are part of yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my next question was going to be, what has been your biggest challenge? Is getting the mental narrative changed, or do you have some other biggest challenge that you want to share with the audience?
I mean, so like if I think about my biggest challenge, is my biggest challenge just as a yogi, as somebody that's like deeply embedded in yoga, or is my biggest challenge as a teacher? Because I feel like those are two different things. As a teacher, I think my biggest challenge is I never latched onto social media. It's not my thing. I don't feel like my truest yogic self if I am trying to make myself look great on the internet. I don't, and I get.
And yet, here you are as part of an introductory social media experiment or.
It's fine, but I'm doing
platform.
it for you and not for myself. I know, and it's like hey. Sorry, dogs.
Yeah, and that's okay.
You know, like everything changes. My teacher in India put it pretty well, and he reminded me that yoga is always going to be the same, but it's also always different. So the core, the root of yoga is always going to be there, and then it's going to mean a little bit differently and show up a little bit differently for people in different ways. So in the age of technology, we have to have social media. But that definitely was, or still is, because I just don't do the social media thing, other than this interview, I guess. Yeah. I do have an Instagram, but I just don't use it. I've completely pulled out of it. So that's me as a teacher, and I feel like that's really held me back. So if there are any up-and-coming teachers like yourself, you know, you want to put yourself out there, I think that it's necessary. I do really feel like it's hard to make it as a yoga teacher without it. So there's that. And then my biggest challenge, just like on my own personal journey, is just falling back into patterns that don't serve me. You know, it happens pretty quickly. More so when you're not as deeply immersed. Like I lived many years where I had a studio, and you know, like yoga was my life, and I just like, it was my number one and main priority, and that kept me like in such a good trajectory as far as my practice and my wellness went. And then, you know, when you're away from it a little bit, I feel like my challenge is to maintain even without being so immersed in it. So like I know that it's there, but even like the other day I was on the freeway and I caught myself and I was like, oh, that was a bad word in your head that you said to that traveler. That's not the best yogic version of yourself. No, is it? So that's the conversation that goes on now, is I like, hey, I reprimand myself.
And you probably laugh about it in the process.
I do. It's funny.
Well, that was kind of a bit of the serious part of all this. I'm gonna maybe change the tenor a little bit.
Yeah.
To talking about poses.
Yeah.
And you know, I think a lot of people who are out seeing yoga for the first time, they see these practitioners in these fantastical poses, and they are inspiring, but they're also, in my mind, kind of intimidating, because you have people saying, I can't do yoga, I can't do that, or I can't do, I'm not flexible. But so let's take a little diversion into the pose side of things, and you know, what are favorite poses or pose? Which ones do you like?
So I definitely gravitate towards forward folds. I like the ability to just go inward, and I feel like, you know, all those bigger poses, you know, you really have to, it's almost like the extroverted side of yoga. And I love those introverted, introspective poses whether it's a forward fold, or one of my favorites is actually child's pose, which isn't one that you'll see much on, you know, Instagram or whatever. It's also one that a lot of yoga teachers skip, because like if you're practicing along with your students, you are probably not going to fold in on yourself and kind of reel in. You're still going to be looking and scanning and making sure that everybody's okay and doesn't need anything. So I really love a good child's pose, and also I was once told I would never do yoga or child's pose again. I had a knee surgery, and so every time I do it, it's this little like recognition for myself, like I did it, I'm here.
Yeah, you got that.
My knee's happy. She's hanging there.
And there's a I think a great example though, because you know a lot of us as we go through our journey of life, we have injuries, we have ailments, and we often lose flexibility or range of motion that comes with that. And what I worry about is that people live with that and they accept that as their new reality. Whereas, you know, your example is that no, I mean, it's work. I mean, I'm sure it didn't happen overnight, but you can recover. You can get better than where you were.
Totally.
Cool.
Yeah.
So your favorite, the folds, the introspectives, from a challenging standpoint, what's most challenging for you from a pose standpoint?
Well, it's funny to think about this because like my favorite ones are the forward folds, and then always my kryptonite was the back bends, which is like the complete opposite, right? So that was always the hardest one until I met my recent mentor, and she has definitely helped me get into a lot of backbending, challenging backbending poses that I would have put into my lower back. And to do it in a way where I was not compressing there. So I feel like that has changed for me a little bit. And now I think just because I'm not as practiced, arm balances, you know, any of the, you know, really super challenging ones, scorpion or, you know, even handstand, those are, because I'm not doing it every day, it's going to be one of the things that I would find the most challenging. Also, I did get a yoga wheel, and I'm not usually one of these people that likes the gadgets, but that one helped my back bends significantly.
Yeah,
you know?
I've seen that show up on different posts on the internet. I haven't tried it. It hasn't been in any of the classes, but it looks interesting.
It's nice, you know, and even though I don't practice a ton right now, like you don't have to do a whole hour of yoga in order to still get the benefits. So I'll do the poses that I feel like my body really needs, or just that I'm craving, which is sometimes again just child's pose.
Yeah.
But I'll bust out the yoga wheel and just like, you know, because life is very cut off from the front and rounded and kind of, you know, shrunken in the front of the body. So just to open that back up feels pretty amazing. I'll let you try mine when we're done here.
Okay, cool. I think Sera kind of mentioned this in kind of quick passing there, is that you don't have to do a long class every day to get the benefits of the yoga. One of the things that I personally struggled with as a beginner was the fact that I'm going in this knowing that my entire body needs to be stretched, and I get in these sessions and, you know, only little parts of the body would get stretched. They'd get stretched too in the beginning, let me tell you. So I came in with this mindset, I need to get everything attention constantly. And it was through COVID where I was practicing with my daughter. We got into a buddy system where we practice just about every day, but they'd often only be half an hour practices or 20 minutes, sometimes 45, but we weren't doing them for really long periods of time. And getting in just doing a little bit every day, for me, works really well. Now, I've been on a trip getting here, and I haven't practiced, I think, since Sunday, and it's Thursday, and I'm twitching. So I got to make time later on for a session, but you get in the habit, and you miss it when it's not there.
Totally.
Yeah. So moving on to our next question here, Sera. So as I mentioned, one of the things that I'm interested in doing as part of my social media side of this, and it's not out there yet, but there'll be videos describing this, is to help people get into yoga as a means to start doing something, and having that pattern of doing things and focusing on themselves. So what is important to me as I ask yogis on my interviews is, how have you helped those that are hesitant to practice yoga?
I love to remind people that yoga is for everyone. You don't have to already know how to touch your toes. You don't have to be flexible to start.
And I hear that, I can't do yoga, I'm not flexible.
That's the most common thing I think that people say to me.
Yeah.
So, like, you might actually learn how to touch your toes if you start, but you don't have to know that going in. And I also really love modifications. So everyone can do yoga. I've done enough trainings now that I feel pretty confident in helping most people get into and out of poses safely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a big key, when I said I didn't like the yoga accessories, I'm gonna maybe backpedal a little bit, because yoga blocks, I'm 100% a fan of yoga blocks. I don't care if you're flexible or not, but those are super helpful as far as helping anybody that may be hesitant because they feel like they can't do it. Also, sometimes, and I found this a little bit more in Belize than in the States, but I had people that were hesitant to try yoga because they felt like it would infringe on their religion. So I do like to have that conversation also, that yoga is not a religion. It's a practice, and it can be a spiritual practice. There is a spiritual side of it for sure, but that can be attached to any religion that you already have in your heart. So, I think that opens it up to a lot more people also. And I think it's actually amazing that you're going to teach, because we do need more yoga teachers that don't just look like me, petite and bendy.
Yes. I started off, and a lot of the things that Sera would say, well, can now do this? And I just think to myself, no, you're crazy. That's never going to happen. But then after a while, strangely enough, my body, became more flexible, and I was able to do some of those things. So, but yeah, in the beginning, this is crazy. You said one thing just a second ago, Sera, that I wanted to elaborate on for our audience. We talk about or see these again, maybe state of the art yoga practitioners that are in these absolute beautiful poses, and yes, they're inspiring, yes, they're intimidating, all of that. But you use the word modification, and I think this is an important thread to pull on for our viewers. Is what does that mean? Can you explain what a modification to a pose is?
Yeah. So I'm actually sitting in a modified pose right now. I have my yoga mat rolled up underneath me. Most people, or a lot of people, I should say, I don't know if it's most, I've never really taken a poll, but most people that I see in classes, their knees are up here, which means that your low back is rounded behind you and your spine is not in its neutral position. So it's so much easier to modify the actual pose. If you look in all the older texts, you are seated on the ground, your butt's touching the ground, and you are not seated on something. But I think for the majority of people, it is so much easier to find that neutral spine position if you've got something underneath your hips.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And the first time, I think someone did a class that said you can sit up on a block, and my first response was, "Well, I'm going to be tough. I don't need to do that." And then I realized I had my internal conversation and realized, well, that doesn't really make sense. You're here to learn. And then I sat up on a block, and yeah, it made a huge difference in just how naturally you could sit. And now, I occasionally I'll sit like now. I don't have a block underneath me, but I'm missing it. But sometimes I'll test just to see where I am and if it still makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's a really simple modification to a pose, but I think as you get into other ones, there's even more elaborate ones, correct?
So many. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have a hard time touching, like if you can't touch your toes, then the yoga blocks underneath your hands is a pretty amazing modification to make it a lot more accessible. And blocks would be used in a forward fold, they could be used in a lunge, they can be used basically any time that you feel like the ground is just way too low.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then we use it for other fun things too, like to find a little bit more stability. Like I love to do like a chaturanga or even just a plank and kind of hug the upper arm bones into a block. It really teaches the body a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you could have done that pose before without it, if we can kind of hug into that block, all of a sudden it's just a neat tool also. So I think a yoga mat and a couple of blocks is generally all that anybody needs. Yeah.
I like a yoga strap once in a while too.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
So what's important about these modifications, in my opinion, that what Sera's describing is, as a new practitioner of yoga, you get into it, the instructor's there to help you adapt the pose to your body limitations or your strengths, so that you're not going to get injured and you're going to get the benefits, and you're going to over time be able to tweak and modify it and maybe get a little closer to those idealized shapes. Maybe you'll never get there, maybe you will, but along the way, the journey, you're continually stretching and strengthening your body, and so you'll be able to do more even if you never get there. And so that's, I think, important. So excuse me, so there's value in the modifications.
Absolutely, 100%.
You started off as a practitioner, and at some point you decided you wanted to be an instructor. What was the inspiration there?
I think the first time I decided that I wanted to teach, I had taken a class, and it was very moving, and not for any very specific reason. Like I can't tell you like, oh, it, I don't know, healed this or that in me. But I laid in savasana, and tears just rolled down the corners of my eyes, and it was like something that I had been holding in. Again, it wasn't a specific thing, it was just stuff coming out. And then I left, and it was like there was a weight lifted off of me, and I played my little game that I sometimes would play when I would leave my studio and or the studio I was going to, and hold on to that blissful feeling that I had after a really good class. And I held it for hours, and then I thought, I need to give this to other people.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And the journey began.
And obviously I'm a recipient, because here I am. So that was what inspired you. But the next question actually, so Sera's seen the questions ahead of time. And this is another one that she actually suggested for us. So what reignites that inspiration?
So it's funny, like the practice of yoga ebbs and flows for most people. You'll be like deep in it. I want to do it like 3 days a week or every day, and really like super hyper focused on it. And then life pulls you a little bit, and then you kind of ebb and flow in and out of the practice. So I think some of even just that natural pattern, it reignites it, because like I'll be away from the practice, and then I'll be like, oh, I miss I miss that time, that savasana tear that I had.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a natural way. And then I feel like for me, what reignited the inspiration to teach is to see the benefits that my students would have, to really see them connect with themselves and to make gains in whatever their direction was, helped me immensely to re-spark that and create and want to create it all over again. You know, like, can we get you to your next goal, or can we, you know, at least just get somebody else to be in more of the flow with yoga to where they want to hold on to it and play that little game also.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, good fun.
Yeah.
So, we've talked a whole lot about Sera's yoga journey, and right now we're out in California, and we're gonna switch gears just a little bit into some questions about the locale where she's at. And so, simple one to begin with. You know, what do you enjoy about where you live?
Well, it's Southern California. I was born and raised here, so it is 100% home to me. Always will be. I've lived in a handful of other places, and I always love coming home. The beaches are amazing. The weather is incredible. It's sunny every day except for the day that George showed up.
Yeah, cloudy, mid-50s, rainy. So I was hoping to be able to do some nice travel vlog videos of Southern California, but may not get to those. So now with where you live right now, Sera, how has this affected your yoga? And I think you've touched on it a little bit here as we've talked. So
Yeah.
You know, people think, you know, California, you know, yoga central, but you've described it, you know, you have you know, work commitments that make it a little hard. So anything from Southern California, how it inspires your yoga?
Honestly, being back in California is a little intimidating as far as getting back into teaching. You know, it's a whole sea of teachers here. So it's a very saturated market. Not to discourage anyone that wants to become a teacher. More power to you. Just get on that social media wagon. Well, that's still the thing, because I think that might ebb and flow also. I don't know that that's always going to be the thing. I'm hoping so that I still have a chance to get back.
There's always a place for in-person people.
That's right. That's right. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's a good question for me to ask myself as I get a little more deeply immersed back into life here and get back onto my yoga journey, where I feel like it's hit a little bit of a pause at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, also about the local area. Southern California, you know, what's your favorite local restaurant? And what do you recommend ordering there?
Okay, so much good food here. Well, it's a little bit of a hard question, which is funny. Out of all these, that's one of my hardest ones. I really
and that's a good problem to have, right? For somebody who loves to eat.
One of my favorites is called Butcher's Daughter, which we actually refrained from going to for a while because it just sounds like a meaty joint. But their shtick is the butcher's daughter got so tired of like the meat side of world that she made her own vegan restaurant. So it's all plant-based, and I've been vegetarian for 20-something years. So I love being able to just pick whatever I want off of the menu. It's amazing. And what would I recommend ordering from there? They do a grilled artichoke that's phenomenal.
Interesting.
That is super good. What else have I had? Their pizzas are good. Ooh, their vegan pad thai, out of this world.
Yummy.
Super good.
And everybody loves a good pad thai.
Right.
At least I do anyway. So in Southern California, from your perspective, and I know this is not going to be a very simple one, but what are the top 3 sites to see while you're here?
So we're in Venice Beach, and I would pick especially for Venice, like if we're to stay local, the canals are gorgeous to walk around. Maybe not so much in the rain. The boardwalk is like the best people watching you'll ever find in your entire life, and I'm a big people watcher. I love to see all the dynamics of people and the different worlds and walks of life that they come from. So those are the, I feel like, top two here in Venice. But, you know, I feel like there's very touristy things that you can do in LA. You can do Hollywood and go see the stars. And that's cool. When you grow up here, it's not as cool. So I kind of stay away from there because it's just a bunch of tourists walking around, and that's fine. But like, I lived in Hollywood when I was young, so it's not like a thing that I need to see. I tend to gear more towards, there's some really epic hikes around where you get to see like vast parts of SoCal, which I find pretty amazing. So we have a couple here out of Topanga that we really enjoy. So just locally, I think hiking around Topanga, the canals, and the boardwalk is my three I would choose locally here.
Excellent. That sounds good. So we're getting close to wrapping up, folks. Thank you for sticking with us through the interview. So what other question, either about you, where you live, or yoga, would you like to be asked? Or did we cover everything?
I mean, I feel like we covered a good amount. I don't know. I'll tell you my dogs' names.
Okay.
Priya and Beatrix, since they both came in and made themselves, part of the show. I feel like I want to share that.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like maybe from a travel perspective, it might be cool if you ask people maybe like the top 3 things that they like, and then also like the top 3 that are a little less known, because I feel like for me, I'm a little bit pulled. Like, if you've never been to California, you have to go and see the stars in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Like, that's Man's Chinese and all the things that are in movies, and it's amazing if you've never been there. Go see the Hollywood sign.
I have to admit that I thought it was kind of a very tough question to ask anybody, especially in such a broad area as Southern California. But hopefully, we're gonna be interviewing other people, and they'll be more local, and we'll see how that goes.
Which is why I kind of tried to keep my answer a little bit more to Venice, because yes, Venice is its own tourist attraction.
Yep.
Abbot Kinney also is pretty phenomenal. I think we'll probably go down that way after this. So that's another fun thing that's very local and very unique. Venice was originally supposed to be like a circus kind of feel, and it still has a lot of that feeling. So it's very colorful and a little bit wild and very my style.
Well, thanks, Sera, for telling us about Venice, your yoga journey, and spending time with me here. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Sera was my first yoga instructor for almost 2 years?
Yeah.
3 years?
3 years, almost, yeah.
So she definitely holds a warm place in my heart. So it's good for me to be able to connect with her today as our maiden interview for the YogaGeorge channel. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And appreciate it. And look for more interviews coming up in the future. Thank you.